Hey.
As popular and well-known as the Jurassic Park franchise is, its focus on the dinosaurs as the primary antagonists has left its human villains more than a bit overshadowed. Ask a non-fan to name the bad guys in any of the Jurassic sequels, and odds are they won't even remember that there are ones. But ask them who the bad guy is in Jurassic Park, and almost everyone who has seen the movie can identify Dennis Nedry, whether by name, by appearance, or with one of his iconic lines. Played by the hilarious and humble Wayne Knight, Dennis Nedry was characterized as obnoxious, messy, and a little incompetent. And while I'm not the first person to try and defend this man's honor, I want to also explore something I find problematic about the movie, and with pop culture in general, particularly at the time the movie was made. His seemingly one-note role as the catalyst for the fall of Jurassic Park is something that even I, one of the most ardent fans of the film, take issues with. Hi, I'm Brian I, and welcome back to Jurassic Kingdom. And in today's deep dig, I'm going to try and convince you that Dennis Nedry isn't nearly as bad as the movie wants you to think, and that our collective prejudices have informed the negative opinion we form about this surprisingly nuanced character. Now, we are going to be tackling both versions of the character for this video, with special emphasis on the film version over the novels. Certainly, the novel is more explicit about the character's backstory and helps inform the Wayne Knight portrayal, which is naturally streamlined to fit the pace and length of the movie. But both use a type of character shorthand to make Nedry unlikable, or at least easy to vilify. Let's examine what we know of Dennis Nedry from the film. He's a Cambridge-trained computer programmer for Jurassic Park who has managed to automate the island's infrastructure to the point where they could
run this whole park from this room with minimal staff for up to 3 days.
We also know, right out the gate, that he has been paid by one Lewis Dodgson.
Dodgson, we've got Dodgson here!
To smuggle the embryos of all 15 of the park's dinosaur species off the island, and that he has used his skills as a programmer to create a way to temporarily blind the control room so that he can deliver the embryos to a contact that he has on the last boat leaving for the mainland. That's a run-on sentence. Who wrote this? We also discover that he has a contentious relationship with his employer, John Hammond.
Sorry about your financial problems, Dennis. I really am, but they are your problems.
Oh, you're right, John. You're absolutely right. You know, everything's my problem.
I will not get drawn into another financial debate with you, Dennis. I really will not.
There's been hardly any debate at all.
And that the tension between them stems from the disproportionate gap separating how much work Nedry does for the park and how much he is being paid to do it.
You know anybody who can network 8 connection machines and debug 2 million lines of code for what I bid for this job?
The character is shown to be obnoxious and loud.
Dodgson, we've got Dodgson!
Comically greedy.
Viable embryo, that's 1.5 million if you get all 15 species.
Slovenly and gluttonous.
Oh, look at this workstation. What a complete slob.
And a blatantly bad liar.
Because I'm going up to the machine. I thought maybe, I'd get somebody something. Because I've had all these sweets, and I think I'm going to get something salty. I thought maybe some would
and also incompetent, bordering on ignorance about anything that doesn't involve computers.
Should have been there by now. Thought you were one of your big brothers. You're not so bad.
He's also a bit of a dick.
Nice hat. What are you trying to look like, a secret agent?
Thanks, Dad.
Yeah, I'll debug the tour program when they get back, okay? Okay?
The film captures the essence of Michael Crichton's original incarnation, but the film version does have one thing that makes him kind of endearing in a way, and that is the casting of Wayne Knight in the role. The novel's Nedry is more overtly unlikable, condescending to the people around him and showing no interest in the tour he participates in when the guests arrive on the island. He is arrogant and rude. In fact, he does not seem to have any redeeming qualities whatever. A black and white villain for the audience to root against. But the Dennis Nedry of the film is charismatic, almost charming, dulling a lot of the edges his novel counterpart had, which is entirely a symptom of casting a great comedian like Wayne Knight. While Wayne's Nedry does seem a little ignorant about the dinosaurs and is somewhat dismissive of the complaints from his co-workers and boss, it never feels like he's trying to act with an unearned sense of superiority. He cracks jokes.
It's no menthol? Yeah, that's nice. Gotta go.
And when the time comes to put his plan into effect, he seems genuinely nervous about it.
Oh, I finished debugging the phones. I was going to debug, so I did. You told me that, so I debugged the phones.
And these things help us see him as more than just the bad guy. He's also humanized a lot in the short screen time we see him. In the scene in which we see him struggle to free the Jeep, this happens.
My glasses! I can afford more glasses.
The slide whistle is a little off-putting, playing the scene almost for laughs, but the simple act that he has to pull a Velma in that moment really brings his character down to earth and lets us see him as a person. This is really an excellent example of Steven Spielberg's decision to cast character actors rather than A-list celebrities, as Wayne is able to infuse a personality and a little depth into this otherwise cardboard cutout antagonist. In a film about escaping dinosaurs, Nedry remains a memorable character with absurdly quotable lines and amusing demeanor. Nedry's motivations in both the book and film are simple. He wants money, lots of it, and he's willing to steal embryos from his employer to get it. The book makes it clearer than the film that his disillusion with InGen has spawned from John Hammond's misunderstanding of how programming really works. A host of problems were inevitably going to crop up when there are millions of lines of code to build, but Hammond seemed to believe everything should come out perfect the first time around. Nedry did bid low for the project, but that was because InGen had intentionally kept all the applicants in the dark about what exactly they needed and what exactly it was all for. When he was hired, the book says, they gave him design parameters, but no details about use. So Nedry had started having to build the program Jurassic Park would be operating on without knowing the full scope of the project until later on. This led to several hiccups and errors in the coding, problems that had led to Nedry being reprimanded or blamed. Nedry essentially became Hammond's punching bag for any time things went wrong with the computer program, and his contract with InGen meant he was getting paid peanuts for all the time and effort he was spending building and repairing his code.
I'm totally unappreciated in my time.
It was really only a matter of time before he snapped. Although it is not addressed in the film, the novel makes it clear that Louis Dodgson had made the first contact with Nedry, and it had taken 6 months to patiently cultivate this man. Nedry was annoyed with the Jurassic Park project. Late in the schedule, InGen had demanded extensive modifications to the system, but hadn't been willing to pay for them, arguing that they should be included under the original contract. Lawsuits were threatened, letters were written to Nedry's other clients, implying that Nedry was unreliable. It was blackmail, and in the end, Nedry had been forced to eat his overages on Jurassic Park and make the changes that Hammond wanted. But later, when he was approached by Louis Dodgson at Biosyn, Nedry was ready to listen, and able to say that he could indeed get past Jurassic Park security. He could get into any room, any system, anywhere in the park, because he had programmed it that way, just in case. In other words, Nedry was kind of a victim. No, not kind of. He was. A victim of corporate greed and strong-arming.
I don't blame people for their mistakes, but I do ask that they pay for them.
The Jurassic Park franchise's most common antagonists tend to be rich company men trying to exploit the dinosaurs and the people around them for corporate gain. Peter Ludlow, Eli Mills, Louis Dodgson, even Jurassic Park the film, which casts InGen in a far more flattering light than the novel does, ensures that we hate high-powered attorney Donald Gennaro and his money-hungry attitude more than we dislike Dennis Nedry or indeed Dodgson.
Dodgson, we've got Dodgson!
This might be a topic for another deep dig, but a lot of times, commenters and reviewers frame this series as being about science run amok. But science isn't really the enemy in these books and films. The real enemy is capitalism, its stranglehold on scientific inquiry, and its corruption of pure science in pursuit of profit. The only piece of the puzzle that does not overtly deal with that as a major factor is Jurassic Park 3. But even our protagonist's motivation in that movie for going to the island is informed by the lack of funding his digs were getting because InGen just had to make dinosaurs, and Peter Ludlow had to let one loose in San Diego, giving away the game to the entire world and essentially destroying the paleontological one. In that sense, Nedry kind of stands apart from the other human villains in the franchise. Unlike Dodgson, Ludlow, and Mills, Nedry isn't rich. he's hurting for money. And it was a big multi-billion-dollar company that had put him in that position. By the way, Vic Hoskins doesn't fit the exact mold made by the other villains, but he is still out to exploit the dinosaurs for profit in a sketchy way, and it doesn't seem like he's a middle-class guy looking for some financial relief, as Nedry seems to be. The film doesn't allow us time with him to further humanize his experience, focusing only on his betrayal, his failure to execute his plan, and his subsequent death. Because unlike some other Jurassic bad guys, Nedry's not shown to be willing to kill anyone or let anyone die. His plan, if he'd actually managed it, would have seen him return safely to the control room, fix what he'd broken, and no one would be any wiser about the theft until the laboratory staff returned. They might end up patting him down to see if he'd stolen them, but he wouldn't have the embryos. They'd be gone, and no one would be able to prove it was him. No one would be hurt at all. Dennis Nedry has a reasonable axe to grind. Change around the film's perspective, Dennis Nedry might even seem like almost a working class hero, sticking it to the evil corporation. The crew of the Serenity and Firefly are straight up criminals, but we root for them because a lot of their targets are rich a-holes. Scott Lang in the Ant-Man films went to prison initially because he'd found the mega company he was working for fleecing their customers, and he hacked their systems to return the stolen millions. RoboCop, Terminator, Ready Player One. Whenever a corporation shows up in an action-adventure film, odds are they're the bad guys, and the good guys are usually willing to commit crimes to stop them or inconvenience them. So why is it that Nedry is still considered a villain? Well, motive matters. Nedry isn't betraying InGen for a greater altruistic purpose. He's doing it to enrich himself. And yeah, maybe to screw Hammond over for being such a dick to him, but it is purely a selfish act and has nothing to do with finding InGen's practices unethical. It's about them being cheap, specifically to him. Also, the fact that he failed to succeed directly caused the deaths of other characters. Nedry's own intelligence, in a way, backfired. His plan went off without a hitch until he was driving. Programming the theft was all he must have focused on. He must have thought driving to the dock would be no big deal. But someone who knows where they are going can get there even in a tropical storm. That means Nedry never practiced driving the route he would take from the visitor center to the East Dock. He took it for granted that he could do it. Mind you, he couldn't have predicted his foolproof plan would encounter hurricane-force winds and rain, but he should have been able to drive that road blind. Irony intended. In analyzing the character, we can see where he might be humanized, where he might even be a sympathetic or tragic figure, but the film and novel gives him a solid reason to do what he does without going out of the way to depict him as being sympathetic. He's still the bad guy, and they do this in a less than stellar way. It's a shortcut taken by a lot of stories in the last century to make an audience instantly believe a character is untrustworthy, lazy, and or greedy. All you have to do is make the character overweight and or messy, and now you have an audience that associates that character with the biblical sin of gluttony. Jabba the Hutt in the Star Wars franchise, Augustus Gloop from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Fat Bastard in Austin Powers, Baron Harkonnen from Dune. The way a character appears or how they are designed can be a window into understanding them. The way that how we dress can reflect what kind of person we are. Humans naturally look for patterns to simplify the world around them, and so we have adopted certain stereotypes to make classifying other people easier. For instance, if you spot a person walking around with all black attire, hair dyed dark, black makeup and fingernails, and a few patches on their black bag, one might infer that that person listens to a particular set of music, holds a particular set of ideals, and likely sees themselves in relation to the rest of society a particular way. I'm not going to elaborate on those things because I really don't have to, do I? You have already formed the details in your head, and they more than likely match precisely the same ones that I did. That's the point. We have a collective idea of who this person is based on their visual appearance. We could be dead wrong about it, but the point is that we all came to the same basic conclusions about that person. So it is that writers and filmmakers, with the limited time that they have with their audience, use these visual stereotypes to allow society's preconceived notions to instantly cast a character in a certain light. In the case of Dennis Nedry, our first encounter with him shows him seated at a table with several large plates and bowls of food, with an additional tray of desserts sat next to him, and he's greedily digging into it, only really stopping to collect the first half of his feet. Even his final line is delivered with food dribbling down his chin.
That was Hammond's mistake.
Not only that, but he's wearing the loudest possible outfit a person can wear, a Hawaiian shirt. The audience expectation is clear. This character is supposed to be greedy and annoying. Just look at him. We next see Nedry at his desk, with Hammond's first comment to him being a dig at his weight.
Dennis, our lives are in your hands and you have butterfingers?
Oof, that line does not age well, and it doesn't really endear Hammond to us in a modern age, but back then, trust me, everyone found it hilarious. A few things of note now that we are in the control room is that Nedry's desk is extremely unkempt. Scattered papers, toys, taped up pictures, overflowing garbage can, detritus, and debris. The filmmakers even have a bundle of cables coming from the ceiling to the ground right next to him, which likely has nothing to do with the character's work, but which adds to the chaotic nature of his workstation. And what's the character doing? Drinking a soda and eating a piece of candy, sitting in a way that shows his entire body, and ostensibly, he's not doing anything. During this scene, Nedry doesn't do one work thing, going so far as to dismiss Ray Arnold's inquiry about the headlights while using his squeeze toy. Hello, and welcome to my tangent. This toy here is called a Panic Pete. You can get them real easy and real cheap on Amazon. I was lucky enough to meet Wayne Knight at Spookala in Tampa last year, and he is a lovely man. I gifted him this toy and asked if he understood why I was giving it to him. Now, granted, Wayne Knight is an actor, but that gentleman reacted with joy and surprise because, according to him, someone had shown him theirs recently and reminded him of its appearance in Jurassic Park. He further elaborated that it would delight his wife because they had actually been searching for one to have and had thus far been unsuccessful. So now I had made further searching unnecessary. Listen, I don't know if the guy was lying to me, but even if that was what was happening, Wayne Knight went out of his way to convince me, a fan, that it was true simply to make me happy. And that is such a cool thing to do. I am thrilled that Wayne is the first Jurassic Park cast member I've ever met because it was such a beautiful experience, and I can't put a price on that. This has been a tangent. The vibe we're supposed to get from this scene is that he's unorganized, messy, slovenly, and lazy. His weight is visually intended to be a clear indicator of his personality. It's tied to the character because Nedry in the novel was also specifically overweight. The production had no problem changing the written appearances of many of the other characters in the film. Sam Neill is not barrel-chested or bearded as Grant is in the novel. Jeff Goldblum is definitely not balding like Book Malcolm. The children have their ages swapped. Ray Arnold's name is changed, and so we can assume was his race. Although his race is never explicitly mentioned in the book, that sort of thing tends to mean that the author defaulted to what they would perceive as a standard race, and we can deduce, based on the fact that few other main characters' races are called out, that the Arnold of the novel was imagined by Michael Crichton to be a white man, rather than a Samuel L. Jackson type. What I'm getting at is that Nedry's entire personality was the fat guy, and the filmmakers thought it was such an important part of the novel's version that they ported it over instead of choosing a slimmer actor for it. In pop culture, and particularly before the last decade or so, where they have at least paid lip service to pushing back on fat-phobic stereotyping, overweight characters served one of three primary functions. One, they could be teased by other characters to allow the more conventionally attractive protagonist to stick up for them to show how good they were. 2, they were the funny sidekick, or when they were the main character, the butt of many of the jokes surrounding their weight. Or 3, they served antagonistic roles, typically as high-level henchmen or powerful secondary enemies. Novel Nedry served the third role, and Wayne Knight served as both the second and the third role. I'd like to take a moment and also state that while the film and novel does indulge in this particular bit of negative stereotyping, his talent with the computer does not seem to factor into his visual appearance, despite the fact that, especially in 1993, anyone who knew their way around a computer was represented as being either a skinny, pimple-faced, bespectacled nerd or an overweight, pimple-faced, bespectacled nerd. But both Jurassic Parks show several types of people being comfortable around this technology. The novel's computer-savvy characters include Tim Murphy, John Arnold, and even author stand-in and general know-it-all Ian Malcolm. The very first person we see using a computer in the movie is a ruggedly attractive dude wearing blue-collar clothes at Grant's dig site. Chain-smoking, organized, implicitly cool Sam Jackson is also shown to know his way around computers. And finally, of course, 12-year-old Lex Murphy, a young girl, is skilled enough at keyboard surfing that she manages to get the systems back online during the finale. The film does not call any of this out. They treat computer skills as if it were any other skill, not just reserved for people who appear stereotypically as if they handle computers, but for anyone at all. No one even calls out that Lex is a girl who's into tech, which to this day remains a boys' club, but it was even more so in the early 90s. Tim simply labels her a nerd without calling attention to her gender, so computering does not seem to play a role in Nedry's weight as it might have been in a lesser production. Nedry's size is one of the aspects of the film that does not necessarily stand up in today's less fat-phobic society. Don't get it twisted. Our culture still has a problem with fat shaming, which now operates as feigned concern for the health of the individual. And while yes, being overweight can lead to poor health, some of the same people who level those worries in order to make bigger people feel less than also partake in the consumption of alcohol, of nicotine, of drugs, or participate in dangerous activities that are also hazardous to your health, like bungee jumping, parachuting, mountain climbing, scuba diving, triathlons, long distance running, hiking, driving over the speed limit, or hell, driving in general. The point I'm trying to make here is that people are going to do what brings them happiness, regardless of any ill effects it will have to their health. We know eating things high in sugar content is not good for us, but we do it anyway.
Sugar tastes good. What am I supposed to do? Eat less of it. That's not going to happen.
There's a subset of people who think that being fat or overweight is being glorified in the modern age. It's not. People who may love their bodies, despite what you may think of it, are finding joy in just existing as they are, and compassionate, caring people around them are lifting them up. The celebration is not necessarily for their appearance, but rather for their found comfort and happiness with that appearance. The stigma still exists, of course, but the needle is moving in what I believe is the right direction. The use of these kind of negative shorthands is diminishing with time, and more actors who are on the bigger side are receiving roles that don't call attention to their size. And thick women and guys with dad bods are becoming desirable, or at least we are more socially accepting of their desirability and attractiveness. This is all very good news. Dennis Nedry's weight should not have been such an important part of the character. When you dig into Nedry's reasons for acting as he does, it's honestly easy to sympathize for him. He does have a decent motive for his betrayal of InGen. Hammond was a jerk to him, and would have gotten what he deserved if Nedry had been successful. The little guy punching up at corporate oligarchy. We usually back the Aaron Brockoviches, the Sarah Connors, the Rick Deckards in a story. Crichton himself paints both InGen and Biosin, and indeed all biotech firms, in a negative light. The work is uncontrolled. No one supervises it. No federal laws regulate it. There is no coherent government policy in America or anywhere else in the world. And because the products of biotechnology range from drugs to farm crops to artificial snow, an intelligent policy is difficult. But most disturbing is the fact that no watchdogs are found among the scientists themselves. It is remarkable that nearly every scientist in genetics research is also engaged in the commerce of biotechnology. There are no detached observers. Everybody has a stake. The protagonists of Jurassic Park were at odds with the corporatization of this science. Crichton had to craft a believable reason for Dennis Nedry to blow up the whole thing, but he likely also knew that Nedry could be considered a sympathetic character if anyone found him at all likable, and he needed this character to be directly responsible for the deaths of lots of people. The focus of the piece needed to remain firmly on the science, the technology, and the dinosaur mayhem. The protagonist needed to just be likable enough to root for, but a Nedry that the audience could conceivably empathize with would muddy the waters. It would create a sense of tragedy instead of one of deserved justice. Whoever stole the embryos and disrupted the power would have to be someone we don't mind seeing get their comeuppance. So Crichton crafted Dennis Nedry to be annoying, condescending, a jerk, a slob, a character for whom the outer matched the inner. At least it did in a world of shorthand stereotyping. A villain for us to hate, and it was easy to loathe the big old mess. It's shallow, it's problematic, and it retroactively produces the opposite of what Michael Crichton was going for, which is a feeling of understanding for Nedry. How much of Nedry's personality grew from being bullied for his weight? An intelligent young man with a bright future in tech might internalize that bigotry, allow the resentment to corrode his good nature into arrogance, and allow his personality to become so toxic it keeps everyone away, both the ones willing to befriend him and those who wish to demean him as a way to protect himself. But in this sense, I'm simply speculating about the nature of a character never intended to be analyzed or granted deeper meaning. He was a personification of greed, given a personality and appearance to match in the author's prejudices. There's nothing else really to it, except that the success of Jurassic Park, its impact on pop culture, and studio drive to continue popping out sequels necessarily means that this story will endure long after even Michael Crichton could have imagined. And the longer and bigger a piece of our shared media becomes, the more eyes will fall upon it, the more meaning we discover within its premise, its characters, its themes. And Dennis Nedry, upon repeat readings and viewings, upon evolving societal sentiments, morphs from a simple antagonist to a tragic figure, a Faustian avatar who agrees to a deal with the devil in order to rectify a personal grievance, fails, is killed in brutal fashion, and is subsequently to blame for the deaths of several others. Perhaps that's why Wayne Knight's portrayal of Dennis Nedry is so fondly remembered, rather than seen as a character we love to hate. Despite all his actions, despite the film insisting the other characters dislike him, we can't help but like him ourselves. He's human. We can see ourselves in him. He doesn't represent criminals or sociopaths, but everyday people who have been pushed past their breaking point by bullies and corporations and lash out for their pound of flesh. I've had this video on my mind for about half a year, but as I began writing, I realized how many content creators had already jumped in to defend this character. But on deeper introspection, I realized that audience perception of the character was tied to his appearance, and I felt that was an interesting thread to pull on. It took me 3 days to script this entire video. In contrast, I continue to plug away at How to Fix Jurassic World Dominion, which, as of the taping of this video, is nearing completion, and it's taking me so long because I want to make sure I get it right. It's the final one in the series after all, or at least I'm hoping it is, because if it's not, it's because Rebirth dropped the ball. God, I hope it doesn't drop the ball. Thank you so much for staying with me this long and being so patient between videos. I am not a full-time YouTuber, so just keep that in mind. I do this when I have little bits of time here and there to write, to film, so I appreciate your patience. What are your thoughts on this view of Nedry's character? Do you agree? Let me know down in the comments. Or in the comments to ask me to dig deeper into another more interesting aspect of this incredible mythology. And stay tuned for more thoughtful Jurassic content coming your way. Subscribe to the channel so you'll be the first to know when I've posted a new video. Like and share and spit venom at my eyes down in the comments. I'm Brian I. This is Jurassic Kingdom. Later, nerds.
You didn't say the magic word.
Please!